Hello and welcome to our College Fed presentation. Today we will be discussing an economic analysis to help inform and make monetary policy decisions for the future. Today we will be discussing current economic conditions, economic forecasts based on our research of the current economic conditions, and policy recommendations for monetary policy.
When looking at our current economic conditions, we'll go over several different aspects. We will first look into inflation, then discuss overall trends shown in real GDP, take a look into unemployment, and lastly, discuss financial stability. First, on the topic of inflation, let's look at the PCE inflation and the CPI inflation. Now, as we can see overall is that we have a decreasing PCE and CPI inflation rate, with the CPI inflation rate nearing that 2%, which is what we are really looking for. Now, there's a few reasons we may see the CPI lowering as it is. If we look at some of the components of CPI, we can see from food and beverage, we're nearing that 2% mark. From housing, we are nearing 2.5 to 2%. And we can see what is really driving down the CPI inflation rate is energy itself, where we can see that the cost overall of energy is decreasing.
Moving on to output, we first will go over real GDP. In 2022, the U.S. economy faced high inflation. This was mainly driven by post-pandemic demand, supply chain disruptions, as well as the war that went on in Ukraine. In 2023, you will see a slower growth. This is due to the rate hikes. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates to curb the inflation, and this ultimately led to slower economic growth. And as of 2024, there's been a modest growth that has continued, and it is expected to go from 1.5% to 2%.
Now we will discuss changes in unemployment and the labor market. First, we can see the unemployment rate. And as we know, based on the Fed's prediction and the Fed's data, the natural rate of unemployment lies between 3.5% and 4.5%. According to our data, the unemployment rate is steadily increasing towards the upper bound of the natural rate of unemployment, which may indicate a slowdown in the economy. To further elaborate on this, we will look at the different factors of unemployment and different rates, such as job openings, labor force participation, and wage inflation. As seen on the graph, the job openings rate is steadily decreasing. This can be one of the main pushers of unemployment to increase. We also see the layoff rate. However, the layoff rate's data is very noisy and inconclusive, so it's hard to determine exactly if the layoff rate is increasing the unemployment or not. We also see, however, the quit rate. The quit rate is steadily decreasing, which may indicate that employees are becoming aware of the fact that the job openings are decreasing and therefore aren't quitting their jobs because they know that there's no jobs out there for them to find. To relate to this, we have the labor force participation rate. The labor force participation had an incredible jump in early of 2023. This incredible increase in supply of the labor force, coupled with the decrease of job openings, is what's pushing our unemployment rate to increase so incredibly rapidly. We'll also look at the fact that wage inflation is steadily decreasing because of unemployment steadily increasing and the labor force also increasing. The reason for wage inflation steadily decreasing is because employers don't see an incentive to increase their wages as much because there's an increase in supply. So, of course, there's no need to incentivize people to work at their company if there's an excess in people applying. We can also see that the average weekly hours worked is steadily decreasing. However, what this exactly attributes to is inconclusive and varies.
Next, we'll move into housing. In 2022, the demand for housing was strong, but it was found that supply chain disruptions and rising material costs slowed down construction. Leading into 2023, the Fed's interest rates hikes cooled the market, and higher mortgage rates made homes less affordable, which brought down the housing starts. In 2022, the housing market faced high demand but struggled with limited supply, and this can be seen looking at the graph of the monthly supply of new houses. By 2023, the landscape had shifted. Rising mortgage rates significantly cooled demand, and the monthly supply of homes increased to about 8 to 9 months as affordability dropped. And now in 2024, we're seeing the monthly supply of new homes stabilize around 7 to 8 months, while demand has slowly softened. Builders have adjusted to market conditions by focusing on more affordable housing. Moving into median sale. In 2022, the median sale price of homes rose sharply due to the high demand and limited supply, driven by low interest rates and supply chain issues. Prices peaked around $450,000, with many buyers competing for a limited number of homes, which pushed prices higher. In 2023, rising mortgage rates reduced affordability, and this led to slower price growth. The median sale price during this time was about $430,000. And now, by 2024, home prices have stabilized, hovering around $420,000. However, the price trends have varied by region, with affordability continuing to challenge buyers.
Next up is financial stability. The graph indicates a declining trend in consumer loans, which is due to increased interest rates. This increase in interest rates suppresses both consumer spending and investment activity. Banks are reluctant to lend, and consumers are finding it difficult to secure financing, which is shown in the graph. The S&P 500 experienced a dip in 2022, which can be explained by the drought experienced at the time, and not necessarily the federal funds rate increase. The federal funds rate had an increasing trend from early 2022 to mid-2023, but despite this, the economy has stabilized and shown resilience. This tells us that there is a reduced risk associated with lowering or increasing the federal funds rate, indicating that lowering the federal funds rate by 0.5 percentage points is unlikely to trigger significant market shocks. In the graph, we subtracted the yield of a 5-year Treasury inflation-protected securities from the yield of 5-year Treasury bonds. The decreasing trend in the so-called inflation premium tells us that expected inflation is anchoring and getting closer to the goal of 2%.
We can also see here in the Phillips curve that we are in the lower right quadrant of the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve is overall stable. It has not shown any shifts, nor is it at any risk of shifting, showing us that there have not been any large shocks to the economy. However, we also see that in short-term versus long-term securities, people are pricing long-term securities higher than short-term securities, which is abnormal from normal market conditions and often precludes a recession. However, this has been going on for about a year now, and the federal funds rate has stayed consistent, and the inflation has continued to decrease.
Moving into overall economic conditions, we so far have seen inflation successfully anchored along with inflation expectations. At the same time, there's been a noticeable decrease in job openings and unemployment has started to rise. All of these factors combined suggest that the economy is slowing down, which could be a sign of potential recessionary conditions ahead.
Now we move on to our economic projections. Overall, with the lowering of the federal funds rate, we see that unemployment is likely to continue to rise, but at a much slower rate. And inflation, specifically PCE and core PCE, are likely to stabilize as they approach 2%, and GDP is expected to remain growing at around 2%. However, these could be tempered by other possible outcomes. The election could create uncertainty in fiscal policy. If the next government is more expansionary in their spending, it could decrease inflation at a much faster rate, but could decrease unemployment at a much faster rate, but could increase inflation, and inflation could not meet target. If global conflicts get worse, we could see external supply shocks to our system, or it could induce demand from our military economy. We also see that there is a continued hiring hesitation in our economy as employers are fearing a recession. They are hesitant to hire more employees and expand.
Now we're able to look at some mitigating factors that are in place. So we can first account for recession expectations. By having these expectations for a recession in place, we are able to take action and encourage action on behalf of the consumers and the suppliers that can help prevent a recession from happening, since we do expect it, and it is, many people feel as though it is coming on. Next, we can account for the 0.5 percentage point recent decrease. So what we can see from this decrease is that it is going to allow for some long-term effects, although we'll get more into the need for these decreases going forward. It does allow some immediate effects to come into place that will prevent us from going into a recession and help prevent these expectations of recession to actually happen. Lastly, we can take into account that most regions are on target for the 2% inflation, except for the Northeast. What this means is that overall as a country, we are kind of hitting that 2%, and we're really focused on one area, which is going to allow us to make a little bit more targeted decisions and encourages us as a nation to understand that we may not necessarily be hitting the recession the way that it is expected by many people.
We finally move into our policy recommendations. We believe that the Fed should continue to lower the federal funds rate to a target of 3.5% by the end of next year, starting with 2.25 percentage point cuts in the coming quarters. We think this gradual decline will encourage a more stable financial situation and will allow other economic agents in the economy to find a sense of predictability in the Fed's behavior, and we hope that this would assuage any potential recessions that come on.
Thank you for watching our Fed Challenge presentation, A Look into New Horizons.